these research grants are publicly funded. Translation, taxpayer funded. So for these people to just stand up and say, well, no, we're not supporting this motion. Well, I'm sorry, you don't get to do that.
For years, critics of academia were told that it was a conspiracy to claim universities were ideologically captured. But leaked campus emails obtained by Northern Perspective show a coordinated national campaign to block federal oversight of DEI-driven research funding. And this comes just 6 weeks after Steven Pinker warned Parliament that DEI policies punish dissent and exclude scholars based on identity and ideology.
Let's take a look. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is an email that we received earlier today, and it was authored on Saturday, November the 1st, so just this past weekend, so we can confidently say this is breaking news. The subject is urgent action, open letter to protect Tri-Council EDI data. Now, EDI is equity, diversity, and inclusion, so EDI is also DEI. But, you know, we're in academia, so they always have to change something.
Dear EDI Community of Practice members, my apologies for the weekend message, but this is time sensitive. Given our last discussion at the Equity Forum and our need to come together and advocate to government on issues that matter to our community, please see this urgent request below. I encourage you to share widely beyond SFU, which is the originating university, before November 4th and to also write your MP to make more members of Parliament aware. Thank you, redacted.
So this is essentially a plea for a petition, which we're going to show you a little bit later. But the email goes on, and it talks about a motion that was brought forward at the Standing Committee on Science and Research. Now, what does the motion say? Well, here it is here. It says, the motion states that the committee requests the three funding councils, namely the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, as part of the study on the impact of federal funding allocation criteria on research excellence in Canada, to provide it with the disaggregated data of all submitted applications, whether funded or not, for all student and faculty funding programs from the master's level onwards for applications made between 2020 and 2025. That this data include 1. Demographic data of applicants and collaborators, including applicants' responses to the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Questionnaire. 2. The institutions and departments of applicants, including the institutions of collaboration. And 3. The language of the application. 4. All data regarding the type of the application and project content, application year, grant program, discipline, title, summary, amount requested by the applicant, as well as 5, the identity of the evaluation committee, comments, opinions, scores assigned to applications for each criterion, and 6, the outcome of the application and the amount awarded. That the three funding councils submit all of this data to the committee within 15 days following the adoption of this motion in an Excel spreadsheet format. Please help share this letter with your colleagues before November 4th. If you have applied for Tri-Council funding in the last 25 years, all of your data is at risk of being included and sent to an unnamed researcher and MPs on the committee. If you disagree with this motion, please add your name to this letter and write to the following officials ASAP and include a message that you don't consent to your information being shared for this purpose. And, it goes on. So, you may be wondering, what's the big deal? What are they complaining about? Well, let's take a look at the petition.
Open letter to protect Tri-Council EDI data, dated October the 30th, 2025. Why do we need urgent action to protect our data? The mandate of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research is to review and report on topics relating to science and research in Canada. However, in recent weeks, the committee has become an arena for targeted attack on equity, diversity, and inclusiveness in science and research. Conservative MPs and some high-profile scholars, such as Steven Pinker, have used this committee to wage a battle against equity, diversity, and inclusion in research. Bolded. Recent developments point to an anti-EDI and anti-science trend on this committee. During proceedings, Conservative MPs have read titles of funded projects out loud and have demanded that the president of the SSHRC defend and explain why certain projects have been funded. It is clear that this committee is being used to stage an organized attack on EDI in science and research in Canada. To make matters worse, the committee just passed a motion to force the Tri-Councils to release the last 5 years, asterisks, of funded and non-funded scholarships and project applications, including confidential data about funding applicants' EDI questionnaires and information about their institutions, peer reviewer comments, and more. This data is being demanded within the week and will be given to an unnamed researcher for unclear purposes and will also be shared with the same MPs on the committee who have mocked and criticized EDI policies and research funding. This committee is asking the Tri-Council to provide data that would be a breach of trust with the researcher community, given that they have been assured of the confidentiality of their data. Data mining like this, with no formal accountability or peer review of the proposed use of data, is unacceptable. In bold, this motion is incredibly damaging, unscientific in its approach, unethical, and puts minoritized researchers and graduate students at risk. Graduate student minoritized identities are included in the request. As applicants, we did not consent to having our data shared in such a way. We demand that the Tri-Councils refuse to support this motion in the interest of protecting applicant privacy, and then provides a link.
So that goes to the link at the committee motion, and people can actually view that. That will be in the description of this video. Now, let's just pause for a minute, because these research grants are publicly funded. Translation, taxpayer funded. So for these people to just stand up and say, well, no, we're not supporting this motion. Well, I'm sorry, you don't get to do that. That's actually not in the cards here.
Right. Parliamentary rule is supreme. Essentially, Parliament has ordered it through this committee, and therefore you must provide it.
The other thing that is crazy is that they're saying, well, they want all the information in the DEI questionnaires. Well, that's information that you put out to the students and other applicants that you actually had no right to ask. Like, what's your demographic? Do you have a disability? Like, I've had to look at some of these when I was in government, and I was asked to fill out some of them, and I refused to fill out some of the criteria. I'm like, that's none of your business. I'm at a job and I'm working. If I'm applying to be a cancer researcher, who cares where I was born? Who cares if I myself have a disability? Who cares? As long as I can do the job. That should be all that matters. And then they go on to say that this is unscientific. Right. A motion in parliamentary committee is not meant to be scientific.
It's not meant to be a study in the sense of like we're studying how patients react to a certain type of cancer medication. It's not that kind of study. They're looking to get the information primarily where are our tax dollars going and what decides which research topics get our tax money.
And they're also talking about, well, there's no accountability here. Well, you know what? You're gosh darn right. There is no accountability here because you're refusing to actually have any accountability to the people that give you that money. And those are the people that are representing Canadian citizens across the country duly elected in the last election. So if you don't like that, maybe you should go to another country because that's how it works here. You get public money. If they ask you questions about that money, you must answer. And you must answer how you're spending that money, and you must answer all criteria in which that money is spent. So, too bad, so sad. But here's the thing, folks. When we originally looked at this email, we thought this was limited to Simon Fraser University, SFU. No. So some people did what the original email asked, which was share this to everybody. And everybody it was, because you can see here that they sent this across the country, and you have people from Ottawa University, Queen's University,
Toronto Metro, I think I saw on there,
McMaster,
or whatever they're calling Ryerson these days.
all across the country. So you have thousands of people that are standing up and saying, I support DEI and I don't want to share my data with the government. Meanwhile, in the same letter, they're saying we want to protect everybody's privacy around DEI. So you're actually outing all of yourselves in your attempt to protect your own privacy.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Looking at just this exhaustive list of names in which university and which department that they're in, and then complaining about, well, we want to protect our researchers, but you're exposing the names of all of your researchers. It doesn't make sense.
And the reason, well, I'm not gonna expand how we got the email, because that would probably give more possibility to the source actually being outed. But the fact that they are trying to block a parliamentary motion, which is unblockable, based on a far left ideology, is insanity. And they're throwing up their hands saying, I'm a victim and I'm a victim. No, this isn't up for debate.
Well, Parliament, in its duties, has the right to request documents. They have the right to request witnesses appear before them in committee. And if those things don't happen, like if you are trying to block documentation or if you're refusing to testify after you've been summoned, you can actually face jail time. We've discussed this before during the Arrive scam scandal.
Yeah, they could actually be held in contempt. And that leads to, some pretty big problems. Now, it'd be interesting trying to fit 4,000 people next to the bar of the House to be admonished by the Speaker of the House. Wouldn't that be something to see? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. But the other thing that they were saying is that, look at all this language from scientists trying to say that this motion was unscientific. You would think that a liberal actually wrote this email, because they're using all these inflammatory words like we're under attack and all of this stuff. And they're accusing the Conservatives of attacking DEI and other well-known scholars. But here's the thing. What they don't tell you, and maybe they just never bothered to actually validate it, which would have been scientific, don't you think? This motion was not just a Conservative motion, folks. We've actually checked our sources in Parliament, and this motion was actually supported by every single party at committee. So that means the Liberals, the Bloc, and the Conservatives.
It passed with unanimous consent.
So for these people trying to say that this is a Conservative boogeyman thing, absolutely not. You can blame the Liberal government as well, because they also supported this. You can actually blame them and the Bloc if you want, because the Liberals only needed one other party to support it. So who knows who actually put it forward, but all three of those parties actually supported this.
Right. So this motion was actually presented in camera, which means the public doesn't know whose motion it is. All we know through our source is that it passed unanimously.
Right. And what that also probably means is this report is going to be shared in camera. So what that means is that all of this information that these people are worried are going to be leaked to the public, that's actually not going to be happening.
But the very interesting thing is, if you read the petition as well as this email that we obtained, it doesn't say that they were concerned about the public getting this information. It just says that they were concerned about a unnamed researcher, which is a parliamentary researcher, as well as the MPs obtaining this information. Conservative
MPs, yeah. So,
So maybe they do know.
Maybe. But the question is what are you trying to hide, folks? This is public money. should be a very non-emotional scientific thing to expect that oversight to double check to make sure that everything is going according to what the process and what the program is intended to do. And you're offended? You're offended by the Conservatives actually reading out program names that were funded? If you're proud of these programs, why would you be so offended that they were reading them out at committee? Why would you? And now on to Dr. Steven Pinker, who is a lifelong cognitive specialist, and he was actually brought to committee on September 15th of 2025 to talk about DEI. So given how these folks are acting, let's see what Steven Pinker had to say while he was in committee.
Starting in the late 1970s, the concept of diversity became popular in the United States after the Supreme Court ruled that explicit racial quotas in university admissions were a form of unconstitutional discrimination, but that it was acceptable for schools to favor minority students if the goal was to enhance the educational experience of all students by having a diverse student body. Over time, the laudable goal of diversity morphed into policies that increasingly used race and sex as criteria in admissions, hiring, and funding. That was the D in DEI, or EDI. More recently, the term viewpoint diversity became popular as an ironic response to racial and gender diversity. As the joke went, in a university, diversity means people who look different and think alike. Viewpoint diversity, in contrast, is the form of diversity that really matters in scientific and intellectual life. It is simply not true, indeed one might say it is a form of prejudice, to assume that all women or all members of a racial or ethnic minority think in a particular way. A diversity of viewpoints, though, is necessary to do science properly. This is not because diversity is aesthetically pleasing, it's because people are not omniscient or infallible. As a cognitive scientist, I can attest that the human mind is vulnerable to many biases and fallacies. The strongest is the my side bias, the conviction that my own tribe or coalition or party is correct, and that a rival coalition is ignorant or evil or both. People are poor at spotting their own biases. As the economist Joan Robinson put it, ideology is like breath. You never smell your own. The promotion of diversity in gender and ethnicity, at the same time that diversity in opinion is constricted by censorship, cancellation, or intellectual monocultures, undermines public trust in science.
Do you agree that universities should be a forum for the free exchange of ideas, including discussion of dissenting opinions?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Essential.
It is essential. You mentioned DEI quotas are a form of discrimination, effectively, and effectively a form of reverse discrimination. Do you agree that doing this sort of DEI checkbox and all these affirmative statements that they're now requiring in Canada has a chilling effect on research, because you're effectively shutting off half of the population from being able to participate in an honest way?
I think it can chill research in two ways. One of them is by excluding sectors of the population based on their sex or ethnicity or race. But the other is, on top of the preferences, there's a regime that it is a criminal offense to criticize the policy of preferences. We've seen that in the United States. We've seen that in Canada, where people who cast doubt on the policy, who argue against it, get censured, get fired, get canceled, and that adds another layer of chill, probably a more severe chill.
Yeah, well, that's really unfortunate to hear.
Now we're just going to pause there for a minute, because think about what he just said. And then think about what was said in that email and in the petition narrative. Demonizing these people for disagreeing and calling out this policy. Trying to use that as a justification to defy a parliamentary motion. And the fact that they are trying to send these emails out to all of the departments in all of the universities across Canada, I think there's going to be an expectation that if you're in one of these departments and you don't put your name on, that's going to be bad news for you when it comes to answering your colleagues. Well, Bob, you didn't sign this. Why didn't you sign this?
That's a really good point.
So, and this is why we've made them all public, because they made them all public. They want it to be public. Well, we're going to oblige you. All of your names are public, so everybody can see who is putting their name to this. So these people that are using this ideology to criminalize thought, especially in universities where that is where it is the most essential to have a variety of opinions, especially conflicting opinions, and then you throw them in the crucible of truth and let's see what is left over.
Right. And universities should be taught how to think, not what to think.
Right. But they've implemented this as an ideology, and it is beyond reproach. It is beyond questioning from the people that claim to be scientists. Because the whole thing about science is you should constantly be trying to validate that your conclusions are correct. And that means testing alternate hypothesis against what you're actually claiming to be the mainstream theory. And if the theory can stand up to these alternate tests and these alternate hypotheses, then that much stronger is the theory itself. But this is the way they're reacting to a parliamentary motion to ask questions about how public money is being spent and the data points surrounding it.
Well, I think the entitlement is what bothers me the most, because this is our tax dollars. Again, Canadians are paying more in taxes, like as a percentage, than we are spending on food, shelter, and clothing combined. So part of our tax dollars are going to this research, and these people think that they are better than this parliamentary motion that is requesting, again, we believe in camera, their data to be scrutinized by the parliamentarians whose job it is to do this work.
Now, this is not going to be the first time Parliament has issued a motion to request this type of data. So they have people that can recognize different data types and say, you know what, that should be redacted, that should be redacted, that shouldn't be, available for the public because it's non-relevant personal data, that type of thing. So they have people that actually specialize in this in Parliament.
Yeah, the researchers. That's why there are parliamentary researchers. They're not staffers, they're not clerks, they're not MPs. Their job is to deal with this research, with this data.
That these liberal top-down policies effectively shut out half the population from being able to participate and effectively blocking high-quality research from being produced at some of the top institutions in the country. When it comes to, let's say, astronomy or physics or even medicine, you mentioned that it's a zero-sum game out research. There's limited government resources to be granted. Shouldn't the best person for the job get it? Looking at, or the person with the best potential. Let's say we're doing cancer research and we're trying to find a treatment to a type of cancer that could save many, many lives, millions of lives potentially. Shouldn't the best research go, but the grants go to the best person or the person with the best potential to achieve those aims?
Yes, I believe that is the most defensible policy.
But the race and the sex of the researcher probably shouldn't have any effect on the quality of the research. We're studying cancer, we're studying physics or something like that. So by imposing this top-down ideology from liberal ideology, it almost feels like that they're trying to, it's political, they're politicizing it, and they're implementing it into our great institutions, which is universities and colleges. Do you agree that it is potentially a venue for liberal ideology to permeate and to implement it?
Well, I guess I would have to ask whether liberal has a capital L or a small L in this context.
Capital L.
Yes. Well, I don't want to single out one of the parties because many of these policies, at least in the United States, have taken place under leadership of both parties. But in
But it does have an effect of imposing a political view onto
one can imagine
researchers.
certain circumscribed exceptions. If there is research, for example, in anthropology or in culture or in history on a particular group, then common sense might say that sometimes a member of that group could add specialized expertise. But in the cases you mentioned, astronomy, cancer research, climate change, and so on, then indeed the sex and race should not make a difference. Starting in the late
And there you are.
Seems logical to me.
Seems scientific to me, but apparently not scientific to these scientists that are pushing back against this. And they're pushing back against oversight. They're pushing back against accountability. And I think Tony said it earlier. This is some level of elitism where they seem to think that they get to decide when they give up data and what data they actually give up to the bodies that are funding them in the first place.
I mean, to me, if you're going to be asking for taxpayer dollars for whatever it happens to be, you are answerable to Parliament.
Right, because Parliament is the institution by which the common Canadian gets to have a representative that is acting on their behalf or voicing on their behalf. And this is what happens. So if you can't do that, then maybe you should take your little petition, take it down, and go find funding from somewhere else, because that is the price to pay when it comes to getting public dollars.
Well, and actually that's a good point, because if you go to, say, an investor or a company, like say it's a drug company, and you're like, you know what, I want $2 million to do this research to try to develop this drug for you. And they're going to be asking you questions the whole time. What are you using that money for? When can I expect, animal trials? When can I expect human trials? When can we expect this to go to market?
Show me all your data.
Yeah, 100%.
And guess what happens if the scientists say, well, that's unreasonable. You're not a scientist. You don't get the data. They say, well, then you don't get our funding either. That's what's going to happen. Never mind the fact, folks, we're in the middle of an affordability crisis in Canada.
Right. Canadians want to know where our money is going, and our MPs are the ones who are going to find that out for us.